Ladies and gentlemen, dear participants in the room and online, I welcome you on our practical discussion where we shall speak about the sustainable, powerful communities and look for the answer to this question, what do we need for this? This is a topic which I'm convinced will be discussed in June in Berlin, where the large conference will take place on the restoration of Ukraine, and our today's event is a preparation to such conference. My name is Yana Brenzey. I will moderate today's event, which actually to me is very close. The topic of development of communities is very close to me because I come from Zaporizhia. Zaporizhia is a wonderful city with fantastic nature and its potential for decades was hidden under the smoke from industrial companies. Zaporizhia was built under the former Soviet Union. It was built for the industrial plants, and the people were just the resources to provide services to such plants, because otherwise we cannot explain how in the center of the city they can put dozens of metallurgy and chemical industries. As you may understand, people in Zaporizhia don't put their laundry on the balcony because it becomes black. To die after the full-scale invasions, the industry of the city of Zaporizhia and that industrial center became one of the targets of Russian attacks. Therefore, the entire logic of existence of the city is under threat because the jobs, the chains of supply, all that is being destroyed. Every day it's a big challenge for Zaporizhia, also opportunity, because during the restoration it's possible that my city and city of hundreds of thousands of people becomes the city for people, not for the industries. This is a chance not just for Zaporizhia. Dozens of the communities where have been fully destroyed, they need to restore themselves. Lots of IDPs have moved to some communities that require jobs, and they also require homes, and they are huge potential for such areas. Dozens of them have been occupied after the occupation. The matter of restoration of such communities will also be important, and it will be possible to reinvent, to think once again anew, not just to build back the schools, buildings, houses, but to create a new structure. In order to make use of this chance, of course, we need strong communities, because only people at the local level know well what they need. As in one of the Scandinavian countries, you may know that they are cementing the passes where after people blaze them because it's convenient for people. It's not decided on the central level, but people decide locally. Therefore, we are here, and therefore Unit with Europe is working on the reform in the field of decentralization and regional development, also development of local projects for reconstruction and development. And for reconstruction and restoration, we shall speak of restoration in a broader prospect. We shall discuss the fundamental things, the human-centered, strong institutions, and unity, cohesion. Without this cohesion, it's difficult to overcome such a big project as restoring a huge country with many millions of residents. We brought together experts from different sectors, various experiences, various viewpoints, so that in the crossings of such experiences, we can find the answer to the question, what is needed that the communities become strong. And we hope that this meeting will inspire you for looking of new solutions, non-standard solutions, because the challenge is non-standard. And after our meeting, each of us will have an answer to the question, how to make the communities powerful, how to make them strong. And with the diversity of such answers, we shall surely get one and powerful response. Now I would like to invite Olena Shuliak, head of the Parliamentary Committee for Organization of State Governance, Local Governments, Regional Development, Urban Construction, Mr. Horvat, Deputy Director of Unit with Europe, and online we shall be joined by Tomasz Ostropolski, the Specialist for Decentralization and Sectoral Reform of the EU Delegation to Ukraine, and we can encourage our participants. Olena, shall we start? Good morning, dear partners. Unit with Europe is a very reliable partner of our profile committee, line committee of the Parliament. We did a lot, and yet we had a lot of work ahead of us. And I'm very happy that we're doing this with you, and we have some practical things that we can be proud of. Today, I like the topic of our event, In particular, we shall discuss very practical things. Of course, we shall speak of the vision and of what inspires, and yet in my short presentation, I will focus on three very practical things. For us, it's really important that our restoration is, so we are expecting our final victory, and yet our restoration is active right now, and it goes along with different European integration processes that have been launched by our country as a candidate for the EU accession. It's important for us that every community nowadays has a detailed approach towards the planning of how that community looks in the future. In July of 2022, the Parliament approved the legislation. I will now quote such a strategic document, which is called the Program of Comprehensive Restoration. Unit with Europe is helping us, and we shall make those documents in 2024. And today, 151 community, which was deoccupied, most suffered with destructions, have joined the process of development of such documents, and also there 14 oblasts are working actively. The first document, Kiev Oblast, our leader, the fastest one, published that document. It's important in this document, of course, to review such things for planning, because the program of comprehensive restoration will later become the basic data for updated urban development documentation, also initial data for development as a strategy of community development. And also when we developed the legislation, for us it was important that every community starts analyzing several very important things. The first thing and the first aspect is economic. A huge number of companies have closed. Quite many companies have relocated. Some companies are looking for new investment opportunities. Some companies have split. They left something closer to the territory with armed hostilities, and another part was moved to the western Ukraine. Nowadays, the communities, by planning their activities, those matters of the economics and economic development must put into the focus to have a look what they can give to the entrepreneurs, the businesses, maybe any logistical things, or maybe they will place an industrial park, or maybe there are some questions about the new production of commodities that will become the new basis for the business. Another factor which is very important is, of course, the matter of human capital, and to place human capital to the first place, because today the demographics is disastrous in our country. More than 8 million, which is 20% of our population, are now abroad, 6.5 million of the IDPs, and we don't really understand where those people will stay, which communities, which territories, and our communities nowadays will have to compete for every person who will work in those companies, where the communities will find investment opportunities. And for us, those indicators of demographics and what the community may offer is a very important aspect that must be reflected in the program of comprehensive restoration. The third story and third aspect is the environmental protection. The terrible things, landmines, destruction of buildings. We saw what Russia did after blasting Kakhovka Dam, what is happening to natural reserves and protected territories. Every community must analyze and try to understanding of what they will do in order to overcome the environmental challenges. The worst thing which can happen to us, and I am quoting this example quite often, when the garbage will be buried in the soil, and on top we put the new kindergarten under the new standards, that kindergarten will be painted into the nice colors, and yet children will never go to it, because there will be no children, because their parents will never come back to Ukraine, because they will have no job. And we cannot allow this negative thing to happen. Analyzing such things, we are basing ourselves on the new standards that now Ukraine will have to introduce the security standards, and we built with a new system of civil defense, the standards related to energy efficiency. We understand that our mad neighbor will not disappear, and the energy blackmail will continue. And finally, the Parliament approved, and the Ministry is implementing all the matters related to the energy efficiency. And those things that in Europe took place for a long time, and now we are just actively approaching them. And of course, the matter of having no barriers. not just physical. I would also recommend to look into the program of comprehensive restoration of Kiev Oblast. I prefer this example, how they approach the matter of no barriers. They have analyzed all the public service centers for convenient places for people with disability. They analyzed all the crossings that require the sound support. They did the things which I like, in particular in Kiev Oblast. They chose 3 cities where they have selected the relevant vocational schools where they will make full physical infrastructure for physical no barriers. Along with next to those educational establishments, they chose the hostels for such people who will study also with all standards of no barriers. And moreover, they came to educational no barriers in the educational institutions where the necessary program will be for the people who return from the front line. And they have the necessary injuries. They have the relevant injuries, regretfully, that have caused disability. And they will choose which program and for which employment they will use in the future. I believe this example of this approach must be for quite many of us as a priority. All the program of comprehensive restoration are discussed with residents and representatives of the business and also with communities. The communities will collect all the proposals, take them into account. All that can be seen on the website of the territorial communities, on the websites of our government administrations, all the data. When the local councils take the decisions to approve such programs, all this information will later on be published on the unified state system in the field of construction. It's important that this information is available to everyone. Therefore, I would like to concentrate attention on this planning, which is important. Now I'm shown is my time. I will say a few words, and that's it. Dear community and business digitalization, we shall continue the process of digitalization. Last year, the government presented in London the digital ecosystem dream. Today, I believe that in Berlin, we shall demonstrate how all the digital instruments start to work, our registry of destroyed and damaged properties, the DREAM system, all other services that are now being implemented, also unified registry of addresses, buildings and structures. And surely we shall have to make for the communities that via digital solutions it becomes more convenient, not just to input information, but generally to manage different projects. Thank you for this opportunity to be here, to convey our message, to opinion. For us as legislators, it is important to restore the country. Thank you, Olena. And on the video communication, we shall be joined by Tomasz Ostropolski. Mr. Tomasz.
Доброго ранку. Що б ви хотіли нам на початку сказати? Дайте нам заряд.
What would you like to say in the beginning? Please give us the inspiration for the start of our practical discussion.
So I'm very happy to address today's event. I wish I could be with you together in Kiev. However, I'm coming in some days. Well, nevertheless, it's a real pleasure for me to welcome the host, to welcome Chairwoman Olena Shuliak. It's an honor to speak after her. But most of all, to welcome all local leaders from Ukraine who, well, give a true meaning to what the principle of subsidiarity in the European Union means. This event is taking place more than 2 years after the start of the full-scale Russian invasion in Ukraine. And of course, I can only praise the role that Ukrainian municipalities played to maintain the resilience of Ukraine. We all know numerous examples of how they managed to mobilize popular support to reset social services, to help organize territorial defense, and municipal level receive large numbers of internally displaced persons, and so many and prove so many other endeavors. And as we go along, the role of local self-governments from the perspective of the European Union will be essential for two strategic processes, for the EU enlargement and for the recovery process of Ukraine. So on this first strand, in November last year, the European Commission published its first report for Ukraine as a candidate country. And there, decentralization and regional development feature very prominently. There are specific recommendations made by the European Commission on what should be done. And all this proves how important the role of local level, the role of decentralization will be when progressing on the EU accession track. And I must say, this is the first time that the European Union attaches so much attention to the local level, so much attention to the decentralization process compared to the history of European integration. And this only proves the importance of this reform in Ukraine. On the second strand, on the recovery strand, well, I am proud very soon, actually a week after our key tool, the so-called Ukraine facility, entered into force. The Ukraine facility comprises assistance of the European Union worth 50 billion euro, which of course shows how the EU is taking responsibility and leadership for the support for Ukraine. So from our perspective, from the perspective of this event, I could, of course, we could speak hours about the Ukraine facility, but what matters today is that this instrument, this regulations builds on what we called multi-level approach. So starting from the very objective of this instrument, which is to support decentralization and local development. Then, through the contents of the so-called Ukraine plan, in the coming days, Ukraine government will present the so-called Ukraine plan, which will guide the implementation of Ukraine facility. And according to the regulation, it requires an inclusive engagement of municipalities in the recovery. It includes very detailed obligation on the percentage of support which should be allocated to local level. It involves provisions such as support to peer-to-peer cooperation between EU and Ukrainian municipalities. So all this, both the EU accession track and the recovery track, they attest to one thing. Local level municipalities will be instrumental for the effective recovery process in Ukraine. But of course, to be practical, to make it happen, we need to help build capacities of the Ukrainian municipalities to unleash their potential, to help them remain a solid pillar of this process. And Pani Olena Shuliak has already given a few examples of how Ukraine is going to operate on this track. And, well, indeed, along the way, there will be a lot of practical, down-to-earth work where we very much count on the proactive and constructive ideas coming from you, coming from local level, bottom up. And of course, the Commission, the European Commission, will stand by you to provide tangible support, both on strategic level, but also on operational level via our flagship You Lead with Europe program, via its regional offices. I'm sure you are very much familiar with it, and I can already announce that You Lead will be there to stay to support you all along the way. Thank you very much. Have a productive interesting event.
Дякую, дякую, Томаше. Пане Андрею, які ви
Andrej, what are your expectations from our today's meeting?
It is not easy, of course, to say something more what Mrs. Shuliak already said and what Mr. Ostropolski, Tomasz said, and especially you, Yana, where you started with a very, let's say, picturesque memories of your hometown and how you see this, how you survived there, and how you would like to see this also in the future with the help of the local development. You Lead with Europe is action that is supported by European Union and 4 European member states, Germany, Denmark, Poland, and Slovenia. We are very happy that since 2016 we are supporting this bottom-up approach, this support to municipalities to strengthen, to develop, and then to have, of course, good capacities. And it was a great decision of decision makers of 2014, 2015 to go into decentralization reform, and the proof now is resilience of population on the local level. So it is not so easy to fight and to beat Ukraine and Ukrainians. So that's, of course, very important. I would like to give maybe some thoughts about where we are, what we are doing currently. And I would call it, we are in the transformation processes. All kind, in different levels, and we are trying to support Ukraine, Ukraine society, Ukraine decision makers to develop to European Union. What does it mean? It means multi-level governance, like we are speaking in this boring good governance language. But let's give some pictures. On the local level, this means that we need the projects. We need the good projects, investment projects, technical documentation. So we need on the regional level, administration, absorption capacity, capable people, capable institutions. And we did also on the national level. So the transformation process is a process of joining the EU, on going to the way to decide to join the club of countries that are sharing values that we all believe that are also our values. And this is the process that takes time. And I was part of this process in 1998 till 2004. And it is a transformation. It is a transformation of the country. It is transformation of institutions. And it is also transformation of values and of the people. When I came on Monday after 2 years again to Kiev, of course, a lot of emotions. And you see, we all will be asked, maybe by our children, what have you done in 2024? What have you done in 2023? Where have you been? My son, who is now 25, he's asking me, okay, what did you do 2004 when Slovenia was joining the EU? Or what did you do in 90s when Slovenia was attacked or was having a war and we were happy not to be that long? And we should also be proud what we are doing right now here, and we should be proud that this will be a history, and this is also the future. So I wish you today really good exchange, interesting information, and slava Ukraini, and все буде добре.
Thank you, пане Andrej.
As Mr. Andrej told us, everyone will be asked, what were you doing in 2022, 2023, 2024? How many years more, we don't know. But all people who are present today here, even offline and online, will have an answer. And the answer will be about the story of success. Because for that success story, that's our goal today, right? Well, I want you to give a round of applause of our participants, Olena, Tomasz and Andrej. A short pause. At 11:40 we will return and start talking about human-centric planning of development. Online participants may also ask their questions in the chat. The moderators will be sure to voice it. So a very short 10-minute break, and then we will come back to work.
Ми повертаємося до
And we are returning to our practical discussion of development of sustainable communities and discussing what is needed for this. And we start with very fundamental topic, human-centered approach during rebuilding. Because during the greeting, Olena said, it could be great kindergarten, but if there are no children, why do we need it? So human-centered approach is the first topic and probably the most fundamental. What are the challenges for human-centered planning of restoration and further rebuilding? What about legislation? What about engagement of people to the process? Our reporters will be speaking on this and will share the practical with Mikael Colville-Andersen, architect, urbanist, Olena Pashynska, MetaLab, and online, urbanist and architect Yulian Chaplinskyi, and Vice Director of InnoRenew, Burnard. And Anna Samoilenko will be moderating the panel from the Sustainable Development, Yuli from Europe. So, Yana, I'm giving you the floor. Please moderate. Greeting, dear participants, listeners. We are glad to see you today. When we were planning this panel discussion, we thought, what are the main tasks we have? And the main task, I think, is discussing the principle, build back better. What is this principle about? Is it so easy as it sounds? Or are there other successful application examples in Ukraine when build back better was real? What are the challenges for this, following this principle here? What do we face? And using the expertise of our experts, we want to inspire the communities not to be afraid to plan a rebuilding ahead of time, but also still the process of rebuilding is quite lasting one. For this reason, we are dedicating a panel to this topic, Build Back Better. Why do we need to think about this now? What are the peculiarities of this principle? What are the details of it? What do you need to pay attention to? And using this expertise, we want to inspire you to start planning. First question to Mr. Yulian Chaplinskyi, who will probably start this, because with Mr. Yulian Chaplinskyi, he's a pretty well-known architect, urbanist. We worked already with an acting initiative, which is called Tool for Project Preparation. Under this initiative, we are helping and financing, not only financing project documentation, but also teach communities for good planning in restoration. 22 projects, rebuilding educational institutions, water supply, water provision, restoration of mobility. And Mr. Yulian, together with our team, has a unique opportunity to apply in practice this Build Back Better principle. And no one probably knows better than him what this principle is about. Mr. Yulian, are you with us? Mr. Yulian, greetings. Please tell us, what does it mean in practice, Build Back Better? Because we sometimes hear that Build Back Better is just install new doors instead of the old ones, maybe change the type of the trees, or maybe add an apparel for barrierless environment. But what is Build Back Better to your opinion? Because you have experience in implementation of this principle. Yes, greetings from Berlin. I'm participating in the conference organized by the ministries of Germany and Ukraine about the restoration of Ukraine. And we talked on this specific topic yesterday a lot, how to build back better. And in reality, people think that Build Back Better is just to make repairs of this or that object. But for me, Build Back Better is about building communities. And in several schools and public facilities, we had discussion. We still see that Ukrainian communities are so surprised that they are being asked, that they're being discussed about the projects and what focus on moderation of such projects. And I think each project will be modified, even though it was initially started by very experienced people. Still, there will be changes, and these will be changes that are very important and very substantial, because people need to understand that they are heard. And if they are heard, people will change their attitude. They will love it better. They will apply it better. And this is the main topic that needs to be explained to the people. Unfortunately, among the local self-government bodies, especially those who lack experience, they fear, sometimes they feel real panic for public discussion of anything. Like a leader wants to push through his idea and they don't want public discussion. They don't understand that it will not go anywhere because public opinion is like water. You cannot stop it with your hands. For me, the more vital the problem is, the more obvious it is, the more you need to talk on it. And you shouldn't proceed with construction without public discussion, of course. One more element to Build Back Better is engagement of community. Really, with the communities that we work now, we conduct these public discussions. And we see that they contribute a lot to improvement of these projects, because no one knows better what your community needs than the people who live there. And getting back to this principle, you mentioned engagement of community. What about barrierless approach? What about sustainable approach? Do we have these elements in the project that we're already implementing? Yes, indeed. Every presentation we start with criteria that we use to evaluate our own project. And it includes such points as inclusiveness. Thank God, even on governmental level, it is being promoted, because before it was not. Now, environmental friendliness, preservation of resources, engineering resources, any resources. And we also extend, for example, in Malin, we explained that 85% of area is covered with asphalt. In spite of having the motorway and sidewalks, you see this is not a square, this is just a frying pan, because people will not feel comfortable on this frying pan of asphalt. We explained that if we plant more trees, we will spend less money for maintenance of this square. And people did hear it. They understand. If you give a proper, rational argument, and if you express it with respect, the people hear it. I think this approach is the most sustainable. Mr. Yulian touched on this topic when we worked together on the project of rebuilding, on the development of the project documentation. But Ukraine already has project that, to my opinion, already followed this principle, Build Back Better. I want to invite Anna Pashynska, who initiated and co-founder of the project Kochati, to love, very melodic name, cool. It was the project to combat such a challenge as lack of housing for people who were left without housing due to various reasons. Tell me, please, was it hard to integrate sustainability and other principles into your projects that already were being implemented in Ukraine, that already exist in Ukraine? Hello, I'm very thankful for preparation to this large conference as Ukraine Recovery Conference and weaving into it the values of integration, sustainability, engagement of municipalities, civil society. I think this year it made a headway. It made a step ahead. And I'm very thankful for this happening in Berlin and in parallel here, and that we start already practicing it. I wanted to say that for me, communication of these values, sustainability, environmental friendliness, inclusiveness, many other things, it was quite hard before the full-scale invasion. We were trying to implement it, but no one wanted to hear us. We were, in fact, a small project research bureau, 7 people, 7 staff, headcount, education, space strategists, that's what we were talking about. We always were promoting environmental friendliness, integration, but it was not time for that. And for me, I was shocked that how obvious these things became for Ukraine and how key they became later. Please show us slide from 7 to 11. For example, gender equality. Those companies that had in the top management only men, they had very hard time because men were mobilized to the army. Those who lacked skill of intersectoral cooperation, businesses separately, communities separately, administrations are separately, they lacked good results. Those who didn't want to work with participation, we also practice this muscle and started working with communities, especially in small communities where it's very obvious how very precious people are and the resources. We worked with many municipalities, and where they had cohesion, where they had leadership, very cool projects took off, and it was great inspiration for everyone. We work with common spaces. Common is better than private. You want to join something common, and the space, in fact, educates and creates a new Ukrainian who is trusting, who is communicative, who is inclusive. Inclusiveness is must-have. 100%. We do understand we should include it. And it's about everyone who had their leg broken, who is a veteran, who is an elderly person. And it also builds trust in the community. Sustainable materials. I don't know how much money we saved just by engaging these materials. So you saved. Is it about saving? Because people think that sustainable materials are expensive, even more expensive than normal. There can be different approaches here. Unfortunately, labor is cheap here in Ukraine. So reusing materials is easier and cheaper than in Europe. And we often found an old building, they have everything. They have lamps, they have old... you don't need to buy anything. You don't need to buy bricks. It's very cheap, it's high quality, it's cool. And it started to be understandable why local economy is very important. If there is a cycle of production is local, then we can organize a lot of things, because there was a disintegration of links to other regions, right? And many businesses had problems. What to do? We don't have... And we quickly make a project of furniture, and in a week, 500 sets of furniture coming. We repaired the whole building with curtains, with furniture. It was our pilot project. It was about piloting and design and collaboration. What am I talking about? These values, these loud words, right? They were not trusted. People didn't believe them. But now, when people were on the edge of survival, it started working, and all the world is seeing how it really works. And the whole world respects us, how we work sustainably in such conditions. It's very inspiring, and everyone wants to come to look at it. If there is a feeling of urgency, if life depends on it, it changes everything. And for me, the breaking point was 2016, Architectural Biennale, one of the best exhibitions in the world, 2016. And there was a headline, "We will learn what is architecture when our life depends on it." That was one of the mottos. Last year I returned to this motto, and this is the reality now. So the role of architecture changed very much. Thank you very much. You made a nice transition to next colleague, Mr. Mikael. I think you will become Ukrainian very soon. You often visit Ukraine, and you spend so much time here. I know you have several projects that you want to implement in Ukraine. Tell me, please, do you see certain potential in... we are now on the stage of transformation, as Mr. Andrej mentioned, that we can use this period and really to build back better, so that architecture, as Anna mentioned, could improve life of people, maybe change even attitude of people to each other.
Thank you very much. I think I have been here for about 1.5 years because I'm helping and I want to help. You guys are defending Europe and yourselves, and I think it's fair enough if I come and help. You know, we help each other, right? What I've learned since being here is that really war, invasion, or disaster of any kind is really the ultimate opportunity for positive change, if the right people want the change, right? And there are many examples in Ukraine of the right people wanting the change. So I don't know why I'm still here. There's so much work to do, but then, and I can't keep track of all the projects that I'm doing, designing villages with sustainable traditional architecture, humanitarian aid with bicycles from Europe that are delivering humanitarian aid, designing a mental a therapy garden for mental health and PTSD based on the Nordic principles. A lot of things that are not well known here. So importing these important values from my part of the world is incredibly important. But for me, every single day, it's the vibe that you have here. You know, I don't think many other nations would be so willing from day one of invasion to start thinking about how to make things better, right? And every single day, it's the potential for me personally as a designer and architect is amazing. I can do things here I can't do anywhere else in the world and faster. You know,
навіть швидше.
What?
Even faster.
The mental therapy garden, the journalist documentary following me, and she's going, I've never seen anything happen this fast in Ukraine ever. 4,000 square meter, mental health facility. But so that really for me is what drives me to stay here, is that there is potential. You are also always grateful that we're here. You always hear thank you all the time, which is never gets you out of bed in the morning here. So there is potential. And you know it, and so many of my colleagues have said the same thing, that nobody listened to us before the invasion, and now the door's open, they're going, okay, God, you're from Denmark, tell us your story, okay, how do you want to help? And there's a willingness, it's not just polite, oh, he came here to help, we better listen to him. No, it's like, what can we do, right? So many different things are possible here, and that's what makes it, continues to be exciting for me, and interesting, and passionate.
Дуже дякую за ваші слова підтримки, за те, що
Thank you very much for your help, for your consulting our experts, for helping to implement various initiatives. But I also wanted to come back to sustainability and using these sustainable materials that you mentioned, this opportunity that we can use and start active use in our project of these materials. So I wanted to invite Mikael, who is Vice Director of Interdisciplinary Research Facility from Slovenia. And this institute is specialized on using environmentally friendly materials. Michael, you are with us, right? Greetings. Tell me, please, we in Ukraine try to use this sustainability component in our projects. However, Europe also pays great attention to sustainability in their projects. You are building, we are rebuilding, but nonetheless. Why sustainability is such a focus? Can you tell us? And maybe you can touch on topic of this new initiative that is actively being implemented in Europe, a new European powerhouse, please.
And thank you very much. So the main thing that Europe is really looking for with sustainable construction is not just the environmental aspects, but also the social well-being, the health impacts, and the community building that can happen through this sort of participatory design, which is part of the new European Bauhaus. And so there's this focus maybe on sustainability broadly, but more closely on the construction sector, because there's a lot to gain in the construction sector. It's traditionally been a not so sustainable sector, and this big focus on construction is because there's so much to gain there, and because of the value that generally the built environment has for people in the community. And the new European Bauhaus is really focused on how to bring people into the process of the design and use of space and buildings and objects in the built environment, and to really make it a participatory thing, so that the goals towards, removing barriers and making spaces inclusive and making places beautiful and healthy are really reached in a way that serves the community's needs above maybe other needs as well, while still maintaining those important environmental sustainability aspects as well.
Дуже дякую.
Thank you very much. You focused attention on this very important point of engagement of community, what we started with Mr. Yulian's speech, and Anna and Mikael too. This is a very important point that we want to bring across too. It's impossible to plan rebuilding project without engaging the local community, without the people who live there, but also without engaging maybe experts, project managers. Anna, tell us, when you were implementing your project, Kohati to Love, what were the challenges in communication between the bodies of the local self-government, maybe some project organizations, and the residents of the community where you were implementing it? Were there any challenges? How did you respond to them? Because everyone says, let's engage them, but there are certain points which you should pay attention to. What can we improve in engagement of the community? I can tell you that I represent Ivano-Frankivsk as a community where I think there is a good balance between community, business, and administration. And we together learned to collaborate even before the full-scale invasion. It was, we worked in harmony as a one whole organism. And our project implemented 7 buildings for 1,700 persons in 14 communities. 400 communities. You can give the presentation, because we have presentation on it. It's a very high quality residential living houses. Also in Kherson we build them, where we're rebuilding. And I see how important it is, the trust and communication between these sectors. How we were not skilled before. How we were not able to place ourselves in other one's shoes. Me, as architect, I want to provide cool, nice housing. And the mayor tells me, but you understand, we will have losses if you build this. What do we do with this? And here is the role of the architect turns into the role of moderator, coordinator, or if not architect, someone else should become a coordinator. And then they understand you need new financial model, new operative model, new administrative model, who pays for it, how much, why do we need to make it energy effective, because people will not live there later if the utilities are so expensive, 3,000 hryvnias per room, it's too expensive for them. And these things are interdependent, we cannot ignore them. Each person should try to walk in other one's shoes, should try to imagine they are not just resident, but also administrator, financial manager, and to coordinate it, taking into account all stakeholders. Then the role of the stakeholder becomes a coordinative role that respects all the thoughts, all the opinions, and we have a bird-eye view as an architect. It's a very elite profession, which is people call us that. It's actually irritating me. So from some elitist you turn into a servant of the society, which is transformative. We are the service for the community, and the dialogue and communication is very important today. So starting from the small things, we should start with small things, like anything we start doing as people, we start with small things, right? Like parking for bicycles. Let's start with parking for bicycles. We need to start small, and then we get bigger and bigger. Hundreds, millions of square meters, where we can show how it works. Thank you.
Could you please tell me, do you have any recommendations about involvement of the public, that indeed we can build back better, that can be involved from the Danish experience and implemented in Ukraine? Maybe you can see what can be improved. Maybe you can give the advice to our smaller communities.
So, in January last year, I was texting with my Ukrainian publisher, and I'm just texting him and said, man, Bogdan, I am afraid of whatever Marshall Plan is coming for Ukraine. Because compared to the one after the Second World War, which is a great business model for America, it did rebuild cities, but now it's even more capitalist, corporate. There are men meeting in secret rooms right now deciding how to make a lot of money with huge infrastructure projects in this country. So I said, we need to get a book out first that has all of these very, not even Nordic, just the things we know in urbanism, the things we know that work, that are tried and tested and proven, and rational and pragmatic. So I never forget his text back. He said, oh my God, this will be the first book about post-war reconstruction in Europe in the 21st century. And I went, okay, we have to do that book. So that's the book I want to show you here, which has been published in Ukrainian only. We're working on the English, but it's for you, this country. I had 32 experts from around the world, including Ukraine. We all contributed 45 ideas for Ukrainian cities, but it also says every other city in the world, right? So everything's in there that we need. All the soft touches, the human scale, the life-sized planning of our cities as a big reminder of this is the way you should go. As you're redesigning, also rebuilding from scratch, I really hope that this is an inspiration to all of the topics that we're talking about. And it is, you know, every other city in the world, because what you can do here and what you are doing should be an inspiration to the world, right? You're the leaders of the free world right now because you're fighting, you know, for your survival. But I see Ukraine as the potential, you know, leaders of the urbanist free world, because I'm telling people around the world, like, we're doing this project, like there's a war, and they're doing more than you're doing in your city. You know, I think you have built more wind turbines in Ukraine since the start of the full invasion than the United Kingdom has in the same amount of time, right? Like it's crazy, it's amazing and inspiring. So citizen engagement has been mentioned. Yes, that is probably, there's two chapters in there. One is about citizen engagement, and another one is democratic design, which is a very Nordic concept. You design for the children, for the elderly first, and then that is good for everybody else, right? So absolutely, this is the city I live in Copenhagen. I mean, it is the city that we know, a benchmark city in urbanism, because we did pilot projects for 30 years. We asked the citizens. Every time you do something, you have to ask the citizens, and they come in and they have their opinions, and the city actually listens to them. It's not just...
Painful.
It's not painful, no, because we're used to it. It's a culture that you develop, but you also have to ask the right questions. You frame it correctly. But yeah, I mean, all over the world, I've worked in 100 cities around the world, and there are so many amazing examples of participatory democracy. In Paris, for example, many countries have, if you get enough signatures, you force the government of the city or the country to look at your cause. But in Paris, they've reduced it down to street level. If we're 5 people on the same street and we say, let's plant a tree there, or let's take away 1 parking spot so our kids can play, we can apply for permission from the city, just a group of people on one street, and the city says, go, do that. It's this kind of thing that we're seeing happening all over Europe now, certainly. So the citizens are the new planners. They have a level of detail on their street that you do not have 10 kilometers away in your fancy urban planning office, right? So the citizens are the leaders. It's time for people like us and cities to shut up and listen and learn and follow this lead. Because if you're rebuilding the country, the people who will live here into the future, the young people especially, these are the people who have an influence. And in this very hierarchical society in Ukraine, this is also the opportunity for the youth of Ukraine, everybody under 30, to have an influence and really make the positive change that they deserve and that they demand as well. So the people are the power of the rebuilding of Ukraine.
Дуже дякую. До речі, читала книгу вашу і...
I read the book. I was inspired by your ideas and recommendations of how to implement this principle of building back better, and also recommend...
Sorry. It's literally out there's a guy.
Можна придбати, так?
Yes, indeed, one can buy. I would like to return to the topic of people, place of people in the society. As you discussed, the residents of the community are the leaders, those who must be followed and listened. There is an interesting trend in Ukraine when you say the urbanists wants the bicycle road. The urbanists are not really understood in the correct light, maybe, from the correct perspective. People think that urbanists are probably some crazy people because they want it, because they saw the same in Copenhagen, Warsaw, and other cities. Why shall we follow them? And as we find there are such things in our society, maybe you would recommend something to our communities, representatives of local governments, maybe to shine the opinion about such people in the society, those who call themselves proudly urbanists, who propose solutions to change communities and environments for the better.
Okay, well, there is a chapter in the book about having a new team around the table. In Ukraine, like a lot of other big countries, it's really interesting how big countries have a massive focus on engineering. Like the engineers have been put up on a pedestal and allowed to do what they've wanted for 70, 80 years. And what we see in the Nordic countries is cross-pollination. So around a table, first of all, in education, at university, the urban designers, the urban planners, we have all of these different categories as well, the urban geographers, the urban anthropologists, they are already in contact with the traffic engineers, for example. Like they know each other. In other countries, I know this from my colleagues, they go to get a job at a city, and then the engineers are going, oh, God, you're that urban planner person. Shit, I have to talk to you. Where in the Nordic countries, everybody's at the table. You start a job at a city, you go, oh, you're the designer, the urban designer. Cool, yeah. Everybody has an equal say in what is going to be done. If there's, it's a huge motorway or whatever, which is kind of old last century to build motorways, but the designers, the planners, the anthropologists, everybody has an equal say in it. This is democratic design, but it's also a democratic process behind, in the office. So that is incredibly important because in big countries like Ukraine, Germany, America, and all that, it's the one group that has the veto almost. No, the motorway has to happen. Never mind all these trees and bike lanes and everything. No, having that process is incredibly important. Some Ukrainian colleagues said, "Oh my God, that's going to take forever." I don't believe so. I think it can happen faster because, especially in the context of rebuilding the country because of the invasion. Right? You guys are into new ideas and crazy ideas, and this one is not even crazy. It works. This is why you see the kind of cities you see in the Nordic countries. It's not because we're different. We just have a different process. and a different focus on who we're designing for. Everybody, right? In the 1950s and 60s, it was only cars. Everybody else get out of the way. Now we know that we need the public space back. We need, I call it going back to the future. Right? We have to go back to 7,000 years of urban history. There are so many ideas that are valuable and useful today: sustainable architecture, traditional architecture, public space. But we're always focused on the future. We're always on tech, you know. So we have to remember to look backwards at things that worked, right? Traditional Ukrainian houses, man, they're amazing. They're sustainable already, you know, and the materials used to build them. I mean, why are we not doing that again, right? Your question about sustainability in Europe, to Mikael, the other Mikael, is like, it's also climate change, right? Like, we have very serious issues. We're running out of sand. So you're concrete-focused country. I see so many billboards for beton, beton, beton when I drive around Ukraine. Like, there's no sand left. We're running out of sand. We're running out of wood. I mean, we need desperate solutions to a desperate crisis. So for me, that's why we need to move fast towards sustainability. But yeah.
Дуже дякую. Якраз влучно, що ви...
Thank you very much indeed. This question was addressed to Mikael, if he's still with us. Could you please tell me, we spoke of involvement of the public, and now we move slowly towards the principle of sustainability, environmental materials, improvement designs. Could you please tell me, in the countries of the EU, how do they implement that principle? Maybe you also have some challenges. How do you respond to them? Maybe this experience is interesting to our communities to understand that we are not alone and our experience is not unique, because we also learn, the countries of the EU also learn, and they learn the lessons which that we can also learn and also make use of them when implementing our projects.
Yeah, well, I fall back to the previous speaker, the other Mikael, to say that he gave some really good examples of how, communities are engaged in deciding their own fate, in a say. So they have say over their own communities and the things that are going to affect them, even in their micro-location. And that is a sort of policy implementation of participatory design and allowing people to have that sort of role in their own community. That is a very difficult policy transition for a lot of countries, I think, to make, is to come to that decision. Another thing that Mikael touched on before was that they had a lot of pilot projects, which gave the opportunity for, in Copenhagen, they had a lot of pilot projects which gave the opportunity to come up with new designs and try new things. And part of trying that new process is this validation concept as well, where not only are you engaging people in coming up with ideas, but you're putting the idea out there and then you're asking for feedback to make sure that you have met the people's goals, which I think is a very critical part of all of this as well. But on a more, gritty implementation perspective, maybe I can focus a little bit on some of the things that I've seen where topics like green public procurement is a policy initiative to have more funding available in public works for sustainability goals. The implementation of this still, comes down to some difficult decisions along the way as to the price value of sustainability, which of course is something that we really need to rethink as a whole, not only in Europe but worldwide. And these sort of difficulties, these concepts, green public procurement and making decisions to change the design of a building using different materials, using different methods for controlling the indoor environment to reach sustainability goals can be very effective, but there are a lot of barriers and bumps along the way in defense of defining what is a sustainable solution and defining how that budget is dedicated to sustainability. So there are challenges along the way. Green public procurement is a good initial step, particularly for countries, I think, I will say, like Slovenia, coming from, a former socialist background, where that transition towards democracy has been, the people who are planning individual projects to have some leeway in how they design the building while still meeting the sometimes rigid public financing goals. So that would be one implementation of it. The other thing that we're seeing is a lot of national level support for using renewable materials. There are some initiatives in Europe right now, like the Wood Policy Platform, which is defining or organizing efforts in Europe to define how wood should be used responsibly, setting up training to help people who haven't used wood or designed with wood in the past to learn about it, and then to organize policy initiatives across countries. And then, of course, there's the new European Bauhaus, which is basically an implementation of the EU sustainability policy goals that were ideated in the Green Deal and the renovation wave. And as momentum is building for things like the new European Bauhaus, that is having an effect on the way countries are deciding to spend their funding towards building projects and renovation projects, particularly related to cultural heritage. So all of these things kind of come together in a really not so simple way, even though it should be, I think, quite simple to focus on sustainability aspects. There's also a lot of room for science and research to help in the process of informing people what is a sustainable decision and what is the evidence for the decisions that people are making towards sustainability as well.
Ви якраз дуже слушно згадали про ось інформування.
You're right. You mentioned awareness and planning. Our government also supports this initiative of New European Bauhaus. I believe that we can promote this initiative in our communities as well to apply such principles. New European Bauhaus, and we have discussed awareness, involvement of the public, also sustainability, also using environmental materials, and also we spoke that we need to involve as many residents and also designers and also local governments to that process. I would like to refer to Yuliana Chaplinskyi. Also, Yuliana, together with you and your company, we now pass the stage of the planning and preparation of the design documentation. And speaking of the involvement of this large circle of people, the designers on one hand, the experts, community residents, speaking of the elements of the principle of building back better, what would you advise from your experience, what the attention should be focused at by the communities when they plan their projects of rebuilding, and when indeed they would like to include this principle of building back better? Because it looks like right things, and we know them for long, but how to take them into account in practice? It would be good to hear your practical experience. Thank you. I repeat in my speeches and on the sites where I participate. There I feel discomfort because quite many government agencies and also local bodies, local municipalities aspire for very fast solutions. I keep hearing on the air the willingness of the template projects, to make the template projects. I hear that some European country has to finance the competition of the best template design of the school, for example. And this is of concern to me, because I have visited about 10 schools from Banish architecture, Günther Banish, after the war, after the Second War, after coming back from being the prisoner of the war and becoming one of the fathers of democratic architecture of Germany. In addition to Olympic Stadium in Munich, Zollhof, he has built quite many schools and kindergartens, and I can see the exhibition of his handmade graphics, like for every place that architect approached with a great respect. And today we work together with ULEAD and 2 schools in the Donetsk region. Those are 2 template projects which are placed in different locations, and it doesn't work. One school is of large scale among the low-rise area, and it falls out of the context. The government says, well, we can save a lot on the design or we can save a lot time-wise. And yet I call the chairman of communities not to follow this provocation, because every template project needs to be adapted to the place. And one cannot avoid the design activity. And yet for nearly the same time as adaptation, a good specialist can take into account the landscape context, the urban development context, the context of the willingness of the community, wishes of the community. And one can make a wonderful project, including the local materials and the local history and the local color. I say I don't want to see template Ukraine, because I looked enough into the modernistic Ukraine while traveling from one town to another town. In Podillia and Ternopil and Sumy, I can see the same schools, same design. Such a big country as Ukraine cannot afford being that uniform. If next to us there are small Baltic countries, which by area like few our oblasts, and how diverse they are. Therefore, I call the local government that you will be responsible for the long-term continuity of the processes. Because the governments change, yet when there is a public contract, it can be maintained for decades. Therefore, I'm against quick solutions. I call you. Please look for the better, look for the best. You should take long for preparation in order to drive faster. This will be the main message to all the local governments. Thank you very much indeed. I can confirm what Yulian said before. In the process, as we have worked on 25 projects, and the schools, as was discussed by Yulian, and none of the solutions repeat. All of the schools I did different. About the schools in Donetsk region, Sumy region, in every school they have used certain solutions that will be appropriate for that particular building. And for this environment, take into account the local context, as it was discussed by Yulian, the local history, the specificity of the region, and so on. Therefore, I would like to thank you for confirming that planning is not very fast, and therefore right now, having in mind that there is a lot of discussion whether it's appropriate to plan the rebuilding. We never know when it ends up, when the armed hostilities will end up, whether it's appropriate to plan for restoration. Our colleagues say, as Yulian said before, we need to get prepared, we need to harness our horses, and we need to plan, we need to think where we go and what must be incorporated into the project of rebuilding that you would like to implement. Indeed, people are afraid of the longer period because it looks, when we speak of local governments and the elected positions, it may look like my voters will not understand me, that I cannot implement the project quickly. And one would like to follow the elements of inclusiveness, sustainability, providing for gender equality in the projects of rebuilding. Maybe from your experience, you can give an advice to local governments and our communities. What they should not be afraid of, how to respond to such a challenge, and possibly how to have the easier attitude towards a long-term period of preparation. Because I can add, when we work with communities, also, we did not start working to die. Until the moment of the start of development of design documentation, we have worked a lot with our communities on the planning of this design, including all the necessary elements, data gathering necessary for quality planning of the projects that the designers can also implement, all the solutions that the communities wanted to see in a particular facility.
First thing, I think that, unfortunately, but with the full-scale invasion, we have a bit more political stability in municipalities, because we don't know when the elections will come. And that's why there is a space for non-populist solutions on the local levels. And because everything is very sensitive and vulnerable, it's felt really when projects are done with real need in mind, not just for the picture. So now everything is so black and white, and it's very hard to fool people in these conditions. So today, as never before, the projects that are important are projects that are really needed for the society. And even the voters themselves will notice the sensitivity, and they will vote for them, for the real needed projects. In 2 years, the majority, you see, I don't like the speculations about rebuilding, like it's happening in the future, because we are living now, right? Building and rebuilding is virtually the same. We still need to continue building. So in every part of the country, they will have their own approaches how to deal with it. But Western Ukraine is a prototype of how financial resources can be channeled for this. These financial resources are now divided into humanitarian resources that are saving people. And we have a lot of those in Ukraine, really. And there is a development, which is agencies, money, which only now start to build up, that start to enter Ukraine. And when seeing how Ukraine absorbed humanitarian money, we can see how to manage development money. We need to learn from this, because I've seen a lot of projects with uncoordinated efforts, with a lot of various they want to reach a lot of beneficiaries, they want to help everyone. And Ukraine, for the first time, shows how strong agenda can be inside to dignity of this help, that we will not accept living in tents, that it will not be, should not arrive when everyone has already left. So Ukrainians make a lot of dignity-based demands to all the world, and I think it's good, because there is a lot of criticism now in the world. Why didn't you treat all refugees as Ukrainians? I agree, but let's integrate this experience of what is happening in Ukraine now to international programs, for example. What is happening now locally, municipalities should coordinate, demand, invite the organizations they need. And from what I hear, we need to learn a lot. We need to get trained, unfortunately. Speaking about urbanists, why do we feel that urbanists are some crazy activists? Well, they started like that. We don't have urban anthropologists, urban designers, or urban engineers, etc., because we had no market for it. It started to form only after 2014. So locally, currently, if we don't have some kind of crazy development with huge money, let's get trained on these smaller projects. Let's engage local architects into smaller buildings, smaller projects, so that they could learn, because all capable organizations are overflowing with projects. They cannot create new projects. They think that new will emerge, but they don't, because we need new capacity. We need to learn for this. So we shouldn't wait. We should use this time, not just for designing specifically what will be, because we don't know when it will happen, but to work on these muscles, on these customs, on this culture of interaction. And I want to use the opportunity to advertise cooperation with Europe. We pay attention to capacity building. We work not just with the communities where we develop projects, but also with other communities. We conduct a lot of events dedicated to this topic about correct planning of elementary things like registration of the damages caused, what is needed for project administration, what data is required, etc. So if our viewers have representatives of communities who have questions related to planning, designing, rebuilding, please, you can come to our local offices and order consultation, and our colleagues will be able to provide it for you. Or you can leave in on our Facebook page, and it will be answered, and our colleagues, experts, will respond it in writing. As to the questions, I wanted to point out that if you have any questions to our speakers, you may ask them from this room or leave the questions in the chat. And we have a question, by the way. I wanted to voice it. The question is this: who defines conducting of technical inspection of a private building? Our practicing, maybe Yulian, a practicing architect. We need a practicing architect who knows the reality of Ukrainian building. Yulian, are you with us? Yes, could you please repeat the question? Yes, of course. Who defines technical inspection of private building? I just don't feel the context in English. Maybe without colleagues, да, я зараз повторюю. Хто визначає технічну документацію, про проведення технічної інспекції приватного будинку? Хто визначає проведення технічного обстеження приватного будинку? The private owner actually defines. If we are talking about the rebuilding of private entities, we will need to ask the donors, those who deal with this type of activities. But generally, there is a construction engineer who evaluates the condition of the building and who has expertise for this. Thank you. And we have a colleague from the room who can answer that, probably. Could you use microphone, please? Hello, everyone who's present. I'm the head of Ivankivska community, with over 2,300 objects destroyed. Every head of the community. So the procedure is this: a person needs to write an application to the commission. Then the commission comes and studies the private destroyed building, and then they work based on the procedure. They need to go to their oldest office, and then the commission will come and they will establish it. Thank you. Thank you. Professional advice from head of the Ivankivska community. If you have any questions, please leave them in the chat. If you have specific question to the speakers, denote the speaker. In some minutes, I will come back to our speakers. We spoke about the importance of this long-term rebuilding planning, that you need to engage the broadest circle of those who is needed, projects, experts of this community, about democratic design, about sustainability, and using the eco-friendly materials. Mikael, I have a question to you. Listening to all this advice, and with your huge experience, maybe you could single out some key points that our small communities should pay attention to. Because we talk a lot about large cities in Ukraine have a lot of resources, right? They have a lot of experts to rely on. And they have more workers in the local government. So what would be your advice with your international experience and listening to what we are talking about now, and taking into account the situation as an external expert that you see in Ukraine now? What could you advise to our smaller communities that sometimes are even fearful of large projects because they don't know if they will be able to accomplish them. Not just resource-wise, not just financial-wise, but if they have any staff for this, maybe you could advise something and seeing the situation that we have.
I've seen the same thing all over the world, that there is a psychological barrier to this question. You know, on many different levels. So, oh, we're a small town. You know, what they do in the big city, it just won't work here. There's no reason. There's just like that they're different. Like the rural and the urban has always been different, and want to be different because that's their identity. So. I often hear this, and then you have big cities like New York. You know, no, we don't care what Copenhagen does. You know, we look at London and Paris. You know, it's like this football league, right, where you don't play the other teams because they're not interesting. But I really believe that so many ideas that I've worked with, that I've seen all over the world, they are transferable. They are scalable, right? Bike racks. You need them in a village with 150 people. You need them in a city with 4 million. You need the infrastructure in a big city. Maybe you don't need the infrastructure in a smaller village. But everything is scalable. In my work and my philosophies, I always try to boil everything down to something very simple, because the academic approach is very overcomplicating everything, right? Everything's just much more complicated than it needs to be. So boiling it down to the fact that that's a city. There are people in it who have to go from A to B to C, and there's 5,000 of them, and there's 4 million here. It's the same. It's not going to, if we look at the positive, we look at the, if we forget this psychological barrier and say those ideals will work, if we just scale them down or we scale them up, then man, you know what we have? We have a lot more new, exciting ideas. Right? So we have to look at the similarities, right? We have to look at this. This is what urban design and urban anthropology is. It's the people. It's not the engineers building roads. It's how do the people feel in their community, large or small. And I have some friends from Lviv who are now consulting small hromadas in the east. And it's not like people like us saying, oh, you people, we will help you. We have ideas. It's the people in these neighborhoods, in these communities or hromadas who are contacting them. Like for the first time ever. Well, yeah, we're thinking like we're kind of bombed and we're rebuilding, and we're thinking maybe a public space in the middle, like a square, and ideas that, nobody has proposed in these kind of places before, but it's the people there and the administrators there who are realizing that this is a time for change. So I think that is another thing that I'm always positive about, is that the people have the ideas as well, right? And the other way, academic approach down, things are slow. When you go the other way around and you activate the citizens, things can go faster. And just lastly, like all the things, in our heads, in our hearts, all of the 5 speakers here, all the things that we know, that we have experience with, all the ideas written in this book, these are not wacky theories. They're not some crazy thing that somebody. These are proven. They are in place somewhere in the world. They work because they've been fixed and they're ready to go. So that is the most important thing, is that all the ideas are there, and somebody else has done the hard work for you in Ukraine, so we know how it works, right? So that. Whenever I meet people who say, oh, that won't work, then I don't want to talk to this person anymore. I'm not here to educate people about stuff. I'm here to just do work, right? So I want to meet the people who know that these ideas work, and I want that vibe and that drive, because that's what you need, I disagree. Last point. I understand what Yulian was saying, but I disagree that it has to be a longer process, because I can speak for the next hour about examples on 5 continents of small communities who struggle with various problems, be it poverty, war, disaster, who can do it fast, and when they do it collectively. So I really believe I've seen it with my own eyes all over the world. So that is really important. I think the one example, kind of a really extreme example, is Tokyo. After the Second World War, the center was completely destroyed, and they had plans to make Tokyo like Washington, D.C., have a big boulevards and totally redesign it, And while the politicians and the planners and the architects were discussing this beautiful vision, there were about 300,000 people who said, hi, we don't have a house. Like, we literally have nowhere to live, right? While you're talking and doing this long process. So this is one of the greatest architectural movements in history. The people just said, let's start building. You got a hammer? You got some wood? Do it. It's called mokochin, like wooden density, it's called. And there's still a lot of of examples in Japan, but that was just the people. There's no blueprints for these houses. I know these guys who are trying to document how they were built, and that was just the people saying, yeah, keep talking, you know, academics. No, let's build, right? And that is what Ukraine needs now. Let's talk. It's Mr. Elvis Presley. I'm going to close with Mr. Elvis Presley. A little less conversation, a little more action, baby. Boom.
Дуже дякую за ваш внесок.
Thank you very much for your contribution. And we are coming back to the same point, that a human should be in the center of all these proposals. A member of your community should be a carrier of ideas. And we had a discussion of, in the community, conceptual decisions that were approved, reconstruction of a square. And there were one project presenters presented the solution. It was cool. There was a zone for children. It was green. Everything was very good. And what was the question that the community that we never thought about? Where is the toilet? In Malin city. And this is the thing that will be thought about by users, not architects. So we should not be fearful of taking into account the thoughts of the residents of your community, because they bring in your ideas that can be implemented, and your project will be built back better. We have several minutes more, I think 3 or 4, and we have a question in the chat to Mr. Yulian again. Mr. Yulian, greetings. What are the planning bylaws can synchronize space planning on the level of community? Quite surprising question. We have a new document in our laws, which is called complex approach to amalgamated territorial communities development. But majority of the communities cannot implement it because they don't have finances, and they cannot do digital video filming. It's very utilitarian document. There should be total stock taking of the lands, planning of rivers, of lands, etc. And then it turns into general plan. So probably we should not pay a lot of attention to what documents are in effect by the time you understand what you want to build. I would advise to develop several strategies. Maybe it's not gray community, maybe some request. You should just think strategically. If you know that you need to rebuild school, imagine that you not just need to think about the school, but about approaches, about the ways to the children, because the parents are concerned about how children will get to the school, not just the school itself. And for this, you don't need to know bylaws. I worked as a main inspector of the city for 5 years. And in these 5 years, 3 times the bylaws changed. And there were collisions when we were doing some work. And it became... and we had to stop it because of some legal issues, and we had to abandon it and to replan it because of new requirements in the bylaws. Thank you. And I want to tell you that we worked with 24 communities. We helped them in the complex rebuilding of the community. We discussed the project that they will secure, that they want to develop the community territories, and there we taught them about strategic vision of the rebuilding of communities. But getting back to our discussion, I want to thank to all speakers, Mikael, Yulian, Mikael, Anna, for joining us today. Hopefully our viewers, our listeners have heard the practical points, why not to be afraid. It's not so scary as it seems on one hand, and on the other hand it might not be that simple. Build back better is not about changing windows. It's about barrierless environment, about environment friendly, about sustainability. And it can be even cheaper, as colleagues said, than the traditional solutions. But it's all about long-term planning. That's what I want to remind you. About the planning, about the preparation of documentation, about using. And we need to do it right now, because we are now at the point where all our solutions will influence our future and the future of the communities that our defenders will come back to. So thank you very much for staying with us. Thank you, speakers. Glory to Ukraine. Thank you. Thank you, Yana. Thank you, everyone, for your presence. And thank you for active intellectual work during this panel discussion. Now we have a lunch break until 2 o'clock. At 2 o'clock, please return, because we will be talking about building new sustainable institutions, strong sustainable institutions. Have your lunch, please. At 2, you should be here. Thank you.